And we're live. Hello, Tom.
Good evening. How you doing?
How are you?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
How you doing? All right.
Get our eyes at the same height. Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very good. Yeah, I am. I'm parked here with a delicious G&T, so I can't complain, as always.
I've got my Nadar gin and tonic going.
Yeah, exactly.
With the coolest garnish going, literally, cold peas.
I've got a few in there, not quite as many as you, but I've got a few in there.
We get quite large bags of peas at home, and it was a new bag, and I opened it, and it's very hard to decant, just sort of a teaspoon's worth. So I got probably like a 3-year-old portion of peas.
Yeah. My kids never eat them, so at least I've now got a use for them.
Really? Okay. my main worry, and obviously it's going to become clear while we're talking about peas in a minute, if it's not already. My main worry was that if it was an already open bag of peas, that there might be like the sort of crumbs or fish fingers kind of mixed into it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think is a good garnish for gin and tonic.
Modern mixology.
Yeah. Cool. So welcome to this month's Gin Me live tasting. This is an exciting one. We're going to have 4 of us talking, which is great. Hopefully that means I get to do less. We are this month in Scotland at the Arbikie Distillery featuring Nadar gin. Don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, by the way. We're going to find out very soon. But I do know it means nature in Gaelic. This is such an amazing project and product. And we've got Gaz Jones and Kirsty Black from the distillery to come in and talk about it. So without further ado, we are going to introduce them now. Hey, guys.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hey.
Thanks so much for joining us this evening. So excited to learn a little bit more about this gin.
No, perfect. We're pleased to be on, and I'll be again on the Peloton bike afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, what with all your kind of like green credentials, I'm sure you must be like generating energy for the distillery on that bike or something.
Yeah, we'll get onto that, but we should be going live with a green hydrogen project this year. We're just waiting for a few missing parts, which we'll talk about, but just sort of wrestling away from fossil fuels and into a green hydrogen space. So we're super excited by that, and I think it will be a first within distilling, certainly in the UK. So yeah, next no company cars and just biking everywhere.
Yeah. Hope the environment would massively inconveniencing yourself because you've got to do everything on foot.
Exactly. Down the hard shoulder of the M62 on a pedal bike.
Yeah.
No problem.
Well, look, Gaz, do you want to kick things off and maybe give us a sort of background of the distillery itself? Set the stage.
Yeah, of course. I have the same issue with the peas as well with children. So I imagine they act like ice cubes as well if they're straight from the freezer. So they've got a dual use, which is good. But yeah, I mean, my background was with Coca-Cola for 12 years, and I basically worked with Schweppes for 4 when they had the premium mixers, and my job was to go around distilleries in the same way you guys have people on and through the club. So I know Walter at Heppel. I met Darren in the depths of his distillery in Glasgow, and a small operation but great guy. And one of the early ones that I met was Arbikie, and going off the bottle and everything. You never know with these distilleries how big or small they are, but we're actually farmers by trade, so that it's all family owned. There's no shareholders. Been farming since around 1660. I think it goes back that far. And in 1920, Alexander Kirkwood Sterling, John and Ian and David's dad, moved the family from the west coast across to the east coast. So the distillery is sat between Dundee and Aberdeen. If you're in Scotland, you can say it's near Arbroath and Montrose. You could say it's by Lunan Bay and people would know where you are. But when I'm talking to people in London, 2 hours north of Edinburgh.
Perfect.
Beautiful spot. Angus has its own sort of microclimate, so we get lots of sunshine, and we've got the North Sea and beautiful views out there. And basically the land, we've got about 2,000 acres. And it informs everything that we do at the distillery, because we make everything in a field to bottle approach. So We grow our own botanicals. Juniper's probably the one. I think we've got about 4,000 juniper plants, so we can't quite rely on juniper yet. But we do grow everything else, and that's all the cereals for the whiskey, through to the various elements that you need for the gins as well. But yeah, set up in 2014. The story goes the brothers were enjoying some whiskies in New York in 2012. Growing up, it used to be a dairy farm, so they used to have to milk cows and get covered in what cows produce before going to school. I don't think they quite liked it very much. So as adults, they all went off and did different jobs, and then came back and set up a distillery. So they converted an old cattle barn on the farm into a distillery. I said I've only been with Arbikie 3 years, but Kirsty on the call has been there from the very beginning as an integral part of what started with the potato vodka, using wonky vegetables because we're a big potato farm. We always get called the Scottish Chase. So a little bit like Chase. We don't make nice crisps, but we sell a lot of potatoes to supermarkets. And Kirsty was involved right in the beginning with that, and when we launched what is now called Tatty Bogle vodka. And that was the first potato vodka from Scotland. And then from there, I'll stop talking for a little bit, but we've got a whole range of products, as I said, from whiskey, gins, vodkas, and this exciting project with Nadar, which you said correctly. So well done.
Yeah. Well, we featured your whiskey on Whiskey Me about 2 years ago, I think. Island Rye, which is a very cool product. And I think, like a lot of what you guys are doing, it's sort of not obviously Scottish necessarily. I mean, rye doesn't have a strong association with Scotland at all. It's malt whiskey we expect to get from there. And similarly, it sounds like what you're doing with the gin is kind of breaking the mold a little bit in a slightly different way, but certainly with non-traditional ingredients, or as the base ingredient, that is. So, Kirsty, tell us a little bit about this sort of timeline of innovation that's been going with Arbikie right from the start. You mentioned about potato vodka and the whiskey and gin. So, what's the kind of mission statement of the estate and the distillery?
Yeah, I think so. As Gaz said, from day one, our first product was potato based because as a farm, we're conscious of how many potatoes were not, living their best life. If they were a funny shape or something, they went to low grade markets and animal feeds, whereas they taste the same, they take as much effort to grow. So that was the sort of, the driving force behind making the potato vodka, which then went on to be the base of one of our gins. But then since then, I guess it's just sort of a farming kind of Scottish mentality that we don't want any waste and we want to make more out of some adding value wherever we can to everything we do. So that did eventually lead to us to make our Nadar range of spirits, which are made from peas. I think since we're farm-based, we're much more aware than most distilleries of what it takes to make and grow our raw materials. Like most distilleries buy in the alcohol already made. So yes, we can see all the inputs and efforts and carbon emissions that go to growing the more traditional crops. So that's why we looked at peas for an answer there.
Yeah, it's worth sort of emphasizing this point because it's not something that's talked about much in gin at all. But the manufacture of the base spirit is quite unusual. I can only think of a handful of distilleries in the UK that do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Are there any others in Scotland that are doing it?
There's a couple, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's so unusual. Obviously, we know when we talk about gin, we talk about botanicals and the sort of flavoring ingredients that are used to create this sort of aromatic qualities of the gin. But of course, gin starts life as a base spirit, and you have to make something akin to vodka in the first place. And for 99.9% of distilleries, that is made, in a large centralized distillery somewhere and brought in and used as this sort of blank canvas. What you guys are doing, and what, like I say, only a few others are doing, is actually making the spirit from scratch, which of course gives you a huge amount of control over what that tastes like, and I guess you sort of use it like another botanical in a way, because you have that control and that ability to kind of moderate its aromatic qualities with the rest of the botanicals. But the really amazing thing what you're doing here is you're making it from peas, which I've never heard of anyone doing this before.
No, yeah, they've not. Yeah.
So tell us why peas, and it's not just like for novelty, right? There's a great reason for doing this, yeah.
Yeah, no, not at all, definitely. It came back to so a friend who works for the James Hatton Institute. That's a crop research institute in Scotland. Who his life work has been on peas, so legumes, peas and beans. And it's really, I guess, the real original driver was how we make more farmers grow peas. Right now in Scotland, they don't really, or it's a very niche crop that goes straight for frozen peas. But having peas on your farm and part of the crop rotation is really good for the environment. They're a very good crop to grow. You don't need fertilizer, but as well as that, they improve the soil and they can actually support other plants that grow around about them in regards to their nitrogen requirements. So yeah, so they're a much more environmentally friendly crop to grow, but nobody really grows them because there was no market for them. So we were trying to demonstrate that there is different ways of using them, and that you can make a high value product out of them. So therefore more farmers should grow them and more people should make alcohol out of them. Yeah.
So
what's the sorry. I was going to say, what's the sort of growing footprint of peas, let's say, in terms of space required? I mean, there's no fertilizer or anything like that, but obviously they're quite tiny, aren't they? And in terms of making a lot of, a lot of spirit, let's say, I don't know what's the sort of yield, the ability, the sort of yield of alcohol, let's say, to be able to make the spirit, and also the footprint in terms of land space needed to make enough.
Sure, yeah, we looked at across, we call them environmental impact factors, and the one that is slightly worse than a cereal is the land use and the area needed. But all the other benefits cancel that out.
And I mean, the amount of land needed is really just a sort of cost impact on you, right? Because you're getting that's your land.
And you're also improving that area of land for the next year because the peas have a lot of package.
Sure. So would it be correct to say that you're rotating land for 1 year doing peas, 1 year doing rye for the whiskey kind of thing?
Yeah. Basically, peas are on a 7-year rotation. So every 7 years that field has peas. You can't do it more than that. Right. But so we grow lots of crops and it rotates through all of them.
Okay, got you. And when you say you can grow other stuff around it, you mean literally amongst it?
Yes, so a big piece of work that I did was, it's called intercropping, where you're growing a mixed crop. So in a field, so we mix peas with barley, because obviously we want barley to make whiskey. So you're growing them completely muddled up together. The peas are able to, as I said, they're self-sufficient in nitrogen, so they take it from the air and they convert it into a usable form and release it that the barley can then use. So you don't need as much fertilizer on the barley either. So again, it's another win for the farm.
How does that work from a harvesting perspective?
So we harvest it all as one. So the two crops are dry. Once they're both dry in the field, we combine it as one, and then you just separate afterward with like a giant sieve kind of thing. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool that you can do that. I suppose they're quite different crops in the end, aren't they?
Yeah. Luckily, they're quite different in size, so we can separate them.
And then what happens to the peas after they're harvested? Do they get dried before they're kind of ground down and like barley wood, for example, or is it used as fresh and then just mixed into a kind of pea soup?
So they're pretty dry when they come off the field. We let them dry naturally. Then you can dry them a little more just so they're stable for storage. But then we mill them into a flour of sorts and then process it from there.
Yeah. And what's it like actually working with peas as a sort of base material for, what is effectively going to be a beer, I guess, because they're fairly high in protein, aren't they? Which I'd imagine sort of create some issues when it comes to kind of consistency of mashing and all that kind of stuff. So what's it like? Do you have to use a lot of enzymes and things like that to break them down into something?
So I guess the distillery can process potatoes, so they can basically process anything. The peas, it's the protein only affects the yield, but it does make a much better animal feed at the back end of the distillery. It's a really good feed for cows and the like. Yeah, we have to add enzymes to help break it down, which you do in pretty much all neutral spirits anyway. We all end up with a slightly green hue about us all with the dust.
You're in the matrix.
Yeah. An interesting smell and fermentation, but other than that, it's
yeah. We actually have a video on YouTube, about a 15-minute documentary that listeners can kind of go on and have a look. It's called Against the Grain, and you get some really cool visuals of the sort of green liquid being mixed. So it's very like Splinters or Shredders caught the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and made pea soup. So your pea soup analogy is very apt.
Yeah, we're
pretty. The variety of pea that you're growing, is this similar to what we get in frozen bags, or is it a different kind of thing, like more like lentil kind of thing? Or
yeah, what we grow is they're big peas. They're called large blue because they've got a pale blue skin, but they're green inside. It's a commercial combinable pea because we're cutting it with a combine harvester, so it is slightly different.
Right, gotcha.
Do you think there'll be a lot of people following suit, given the way people see sort of climate, the effects of climate and stuff like that nowadays, and it makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, I'm surprised that nobody has thought of it before, but then again, there are a lot of things that people don't think of until they think of it, aren't there?
Yeah. I hope it makes people think that there is alternative raw materials out there. Like we've been approached by quite a few folk wanting to buy the spirit off us, which we don't do. But it shows that there is a desire out there for people.
There is sort of friends with Becky at Tenlock, so there is a pod vodka out there that sort of came out recently. So they actually buy their peas from somewhere down south, I don't know, Norwich or whatever, and then take them up to Manchester. So there are other people looking in this space. So I think that's the thing. All of Kirsty's research as well is published, so it's not something that we've cracked it and we're not sharing the information. And as a small craft distillery, or not necessarily small, but if some of the bigger players took it on and decided to look into it, because they would have the ability to be able to do it, it could make quite a big difference versus, I think, Scotland. I'm not a farmer. I know I don't even look like a farmer, do I? But make a lot of barley. So it's barley, and 2/3 barley. And that's very nitrogen hungry. So when Kirsty's talking about peas being self-sufficient and taking nitrogen from the air, but barley's the complete opposite. So I think in terms of that farming side of things, it's really important.
Yeah, definitely.
So what about the rest of the botanicals then? Because that's impressive as well. I mean, you're growing nearly everything except the juniper, right?
Yeah.
So can we just go through them? Or I don't know how secret the recipe is, but I don't think it's secret, is it?
No,
so let's just talk about all of that. Is a lot of it in polytunnels and things like that then?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so when we came to decide, as you mentioned earlier, you described it perfectly. The spirit is one of our kind of botanicals, and we try and match the flavors. When it came to Nadar, so we already have 2 gins in the market. One, Kirsty's gin, which is quite more traditional or a bit floral gin. And we have Axe gin, which is completely different. It's a more lots of spices and things like ginger and honey and things in it. So we wanted to make sure that, first of all, Nadar gin was totally different. It still has that core gin, which makes the flavor of gin. So juniper, coriander, angelica root. But then to make it a bit different, we went down the citrus route, but needed to make sure that they were Scottish grown citrus, because there's no point making an environmentally friendly gin and then importing citrus from around the world. So the 2 key botanicals we include are lemongrass. So we grow loads of lemongrass in our polytunnel, and then the leaf of the macroot lime, which again we grow on site.
And they're quite concentrated citrusy. I mean, a lemon's quite concentrated citrus as well, isn't it? I suppose, but harder to grow than lemongrass, I suppose. Maybe.
Yeah. So we do have some lemon trees, but we wouldn't get enough lemons. We do. They are fruiting, but not to the scale that we need.
That's a brilliant workaround. And it is. I mean, I think, although we've obviously emphasised the pea thing, I think it's quite a citrusy gin when it boils down to it. It's
That's
pretty
what
lemony.
it was. Yeah.
Nice. And just going back to what we were saying about the pea spirit and it's serving as a botanical, what does it taste like? as a sort of vodka, if you like you know, unadulterated with botanicals? Does it have a sort of sweet vegetal thing to it that you might think a pea spirit would have?
Yeah, I think it's a lot. Well, I guess with a lot of all our base spirits, there's also a textural mouthfeel thing that's different with all of them. For this, yeah, I do think it's still pretty creamy and smooth, but has got a slight herbalness, which I think goes well with the Macroot lime, because it's a very herbal citrus sort of flavor.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it matches with that.
Nice. Cool. Well, I don't know, Tom, do you want to make a drink?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah, well, obviously, the thing, when I was looking at which drinks to make, there were a few that sounded... What we do every month is we suggest a few different styles of serves for each of the gins that we feature. And obviously one of them being the relatively simple gin and tonic that we've got here, which obviously makes sense, as you guys are familiar with anyway, with peas, which brings a little bit of freshness and greenness to the drink itself, which I've got here. I've just got a sprig of mint out of my garden, albeit my mint plant is absolutely tiny, so I've only got about a couple of sprigs left. and a nice slice of green apple.
It's not a big night, mate, because
it's getting there. And a nice slice of green apple as well, just to add a bit of acidity to it. But with the other drink that I'm making, one of the other cocktails that we recommended was a drink called a Southside. And a Southside is a 19th century drink, which is basically between a mojito and a daiquiri, but with gin. Really, it contains mint. Normally contains mint, fresh lime, little bit of sugar, and gin. Whereas, as you'll know, a daiquiri being lime, sugar, and rum, and a mojito being lime, sugar, rum, and mint. So it's kind of a really nice sort of hybrid drink of those two. And I think also one that should prove quite popular for any gin drinkers who are familiar with the mojito or the daiquiri. And maybe one that they've never heard of before. So for this, I've actually decided to twist it up a little bit, to be honest with you. It's the first time, I think it's the first time ever, where I've gone a little bit off piece with it and decided to do things a little bit different. And so in this instance, what I've come up with, or what I wanted to make, was a slight twist on a Southside, but instead of using lime juice, I've actually created a kiwi-based citric acid solution. With blended kiwi citric acid and a bit of sugar in here to basically create this sort of deep, almost, although again, not necessarily homegrown or locally grown, this sort of tropical kiwi flavour coming through with a bit of acidity. You get acidity in the kiwi anyway, and obviously balancing that with sugar. And I'm going to use that as the sort of sour, sweet element that you would normally get from lime and from the sugar in a Southside, basically. I'm also going to make this as a Southside fizz rather than a classic Southside, which would be served straight up or in a coupe or a martini glass, just purely because I like the addition of soda water to this drink. So I'm going to add a little bit of soda in there. So I'm going to start with around 30 millilitres of this kiwi citric acid and sugar solution. I'm then going to add five or six sprigs of mint or leaves of mint, which I'm just going to give a slight clap to. Pop them in there as well. And I'm going to add 50 ml of the Nadar climate positive gin. And I'm going to give this a shake. So I'm going to give this a shake like so. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm just going to ice up my highball glass, which is what I'm going to serve this with. As I say, if you're just going to make a classic sort of Southside, you wouldn't be serving this in a glass like this. It would be in a martini glass or a coupe, but I'm going to go along with it. So give this a shake. And then I'm going to simply strain this over the top of my ice in this glass here. I'm going to add a splash of soda just on top. And I'm going to garnish this because I'm running out of mint, and I'm going to repurpose my mint sprig from my gin and tonic as the garnish for this drink. So I'm drinking both of them, so it's okay in this case. But if I was serving it for a guest, I'd probably not do that.
It's a very sustainable approach to it, though, isn't it?
Say again?
Very sustainable approach.
Sustainable. It's well, like I said to you, I think I've only got one sprig left in the garden, so I need to save that for another day. So here we have a Southside Fizz, or a twist on a Southside Fizz. Nadar gin, kiwi, a sort of citric kiwi solution with sugar, shaken with mint, topped with soda. So it's good as we're moving in. You know, we're 3 weeks away from spring now. We need to start thinking about lighter, more sort of spring, summery style drinks when the weather turns and we're starting to look at sitting in the garden. So this is a great example of that. So nice. Cheers.
Well, it's beautiful.
That's good.
Yeah, nice. I mean, that kind of, it sort of ended up being a gin mojito, really, didn't it? Shaken.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Nothing wrong with that at all.
No,
yeah.
We had a nice cocktail with it when we launched. We actually launched as COVID hit, if everyone remembers back then. But after COVID, we were in the Savoy at the American Bar, and they made a sort of lettuce cordial. It was a sort of long green serve with Fino sherry and a Macroot lime as well. It was a beautiful sort of take on it. What I find generally with Arbikie spirits across the board, because we make the base spirit, they always just add a little layer of complexity to standard cocktails or classic cocktails, which I think is rare because a lot of people don't have control over their base spirit.
I think with the especially with the Nadar gin as well, there's a real opportunity there to sort of own that sort of fresh. Fresh is the word that sort of springs to mind, both in terms of the sort of climate positive element, but also the peas, the sort of everything being, or almost everything being homegrown or grown on site and all that kind of stuff. It's like, it's tailor made to make drinks that basically are springy, fresh. The pot that have got these sort of local ingredients. It's ideal for that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably not, not necessarily the sort of foraged route, but at least really drive home the stuff that is grown, UK grown, and can be sourced and bought seasonally, which I think works really well.
Yeah, we've had loads of success with it, certainly over in America as well, and just around those sustainability credentials and looking at having sustainable spaces on menus. So. I know there's people like Two Drifters, there's Cooper King, there's lots of people doing great process work, and I think what makes Arbikie different is because we go right from the soil right the way through, and a lot of the greenhouse gases actually occur during the making of the neutral spirit, which I don't think there's been heaps of work on, but it certainly gives us standout. As I said, we've got a full range of products, and the Nadar ones are certainly leading the way for us in the trade at the minute.
And most importantly, of course, like everything, it tastes delicious, which is the
key. Yeah, exactly. It's the key, isn't it?
It tastes fantastic.
I think
through all of that, great spirit.
I don't want to drop Kirsty in it, but I'm going to drop you in it. Just in terms of saying it's climate positive. So everything that we do is backed by science. So James Hutton Institute, all of these things. It's not a greenwashing thing or anything like that. So we arrive at about 1.54 CO2 sort of saving per bottle. Is it worth telling the guys just a little bit on that so they sort of understand where that's coming from? Because
sure.
I'm really, if you can, that'd be great.
So we formed something called a life cycle analysis, which looks at all the components that go into making something and the footprints associated with them. So we did this through, we had lots of partners involved, but it was mainly led by Trinity College in Dublin and Galway University. So it was done by experts in life cycle analysis. So as I said, we looked at 14 different impact factors. And compared a bottle of gin made from peas to one made from the more traditional things like wheat, and calculated the footprint from every step in the growing, processing, at the farm level, at the distillery, the packaging, it all went into it. And that's where the number came from, that a bottle has minus 1.54 kilograms of CO2 compared to a bottle of gin made from wheat, for example. So and it's all published, as Gaz said, as open access in scientific journals.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's really, that's what I mean. It's fantastic, isn't it? Like I say, it's paving the way, basically, isn't it? Really.
Hopefully.
I'd imagine that's the way where everybody's trying to head to, aren't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was probably not speak out of turn, but with it being family owned and we've got no stakeholders and stuff, so I think, you know, if Kirsty's doing a PhD on using legumes and John turns around and goes, sod it, give it a go. If it doesn't work, we'll chuck it away. And I don't know if that's exactly how it happened, but that's kind of quite rare for a business to be able to take those risks.
Yeah, it's not that far off.
I guess that's probably, part of that's born out of the fact that you're not small, but you're not massive, and you've got the agility to be able to move quite quickly. And, you know, it'll take, let's say, you know, I don't know, a Diageo, for example, you know, it's like trying to steer it's trying to steer a huge tanker and turn it around in a canal, right? As in, it's not easy. It's not easy for them. They might have the money, but not the agility to be able to actually just turn something around rapidly like that and change, change your whole position of a brand. So it's always.
I think it was the same with the rye whiskey. I think we were releasing it. So it's, I don't know if it's like 7-8 years now, but we were releasing it as other people were putting it in casks, and that's you know, it's quite rare for a family business, which is now bigger, to have, you know, the first potato vodka, a first pea gin and vodka, the first climate positive spirit, and the first rye whiskey. And I think it just lend into that. I mean, when I was at Coke, we'd have meetings about meetings and then a meeting about the meeting. And, you know, that is, you know, corporates work really well, but they do sometimes get caught in the tape of how to do things.
Yeah, that's true.
Nice. I've got one more question. I'm intrigued to know. Have you taken the pea? I don't even know what you call it. Pea beer, pea wash. Have you pot distilled that? Have you made it like a whiskey? Have you sort of seen what happens when you kind of retain more of the character? And in addition to that, have you then put that into barrels? And are we going to see something called whiskey pea?
I feel like we might have some lawyers on our case if we did that. When we were doing trials, I did do small scale pot distillations, just because you can't really do column distillation to 96% at small scale. So we have done it. And it makes a really nice spirit. It would be my PhD supervisor's dream if we released a whiskey made out of peas. That's his like goal in life. But we'll see what we release in the future.
Whisk pea. There you go.
Yeah.
We'll leave everybody with that.
I'm going to go trademark whiskey.
Probably will as well.
Right, cool. Well, look, that was fantastic. Like a good half an hour of knowledge. Really cool. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you for having us, because I think when you have these things, getting the samples into homes to the people in the club and stuff is super important, because in terms of buying it, it's through our website, it's online. We're not in any supermarkets, and purposely so. So you do kind of have to seek to find. So if people taste it, I know they can buy it through yourselves as well. It's super important. And come see us at the distillery, because as of next month, we have some nice new fancy cabins they can stay in. Some mirrored cabins called oud houses from Estonia, I think. But just some super luxury, sustainable living where you wake up and you're sat on a farm overlooking Lunan Bay. So I'll send you some pictures when we go live with it, because we've just got to get a caravan license from the council. Or something like that, because anything that has to be transported on a vehicle is classed as a caravan, even a luxury cabin. So
which now can't move, but anyway,
it can't move because it's all plumbed in. But there's big growths with us, and the distillery experience has been open a few years now as well. So it's certainly jumping from a startup family business into a global.
We should definitely come up. Never been to Angus before, so let's do it. Yeah.
We've been trying to get Craig Harper up for a little while, so I know you guys are friends. So get a trip planned in, and we'll host you for sure.
We will.
That's good. Thanks for the invite. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. No.
All right. Perfect. Thanks a lot, guys, and thanks everyone for tuning in. And we'll see you next time.